It certainly seems like the Premier League is no longer a priority for Mikel Arteta as Arsenal draw 1-1 with Brentford with a very heavily rotated side once again. This is the Arsenal versus Brentford match review podcast here at Arsenal Unfiltered, and I'm going to be going through all the key details here for you this morning. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, your 3 times a week dose of Arsenal coverage with me, your host Mark. I really hope wherever you are well, and you might not have enjoyed yesterday's draw against Brentford, but hopefully you're having a nice weekend regardless. It was a bit of a stale game, and definitely looking at some of the results around the league, not the most interesting game that was on yesterday. I mean, City played out a fantastic game, didn't they? Just trying to find the scores. It was 5-2 against Crystal Palace. Brighton, Leicester had a good game, and obviously Villa winning 3-0 against Southampton. But I think they missed 2 penalties, and the shock win for Everton against Nottingham Forest kind of means that our 5:30 game was the most boring game of the day, and that's a shame. We want our games to be exciting, and I think that's probably something I'm going to come on to in a little bit when we talk about the lineup and talk about how we are prioritising the Premier League at the moment, because it's a strange feeling. This is not how Mikel Arteta has run the club in previous years. In previous years, he's received a lot of criticism for not doing what he is doing right now, not rotating for minor games in and amongst really big games. And he's always said, and he's always certainly held that forward-facing media profile of every game's important, we have to go out to win every game. And that's absolutely right, proper and correct. But maybe his selections at the moment are not kind of giving that message for the Premier League matches, of course. Let's get into it. Let's just get started. We saw a lineup of Raya, Partey at right back, Saliba, Kivior, Tierney at left back. So I think the 2 centre-backs, they sort of pick themselves at this point with the injuries. We've got Calafiori still not back, more issues for Ben White, more complications for him. But Tierney and Partey being at right back shows just how much they want to protect Timber. And Tierney playing, I was very surprised at that. I thought that would be Zinchenko in that position at the very minimum. And we'd see more more attacking players further up the pitch, because of course Zinchenko played in the kind of 8/10 role in front of Jorginho and alongside Rice, who I thought was really good today. We'll come on to individual performances later. The front three we lined up with was Nwaneri, Trossard, Martinelli. Now I thought Nwaneri would be in the position Zinchenko was in, and I thought we'd see Sterling, Trossard, Martinelli in some sort of setup. So yeah, it was interesting really when that came out. I have watched the game on a rewatch. I wasn't able to watch yesterday, and I think going through the game and watching it, with the knowledge of what's happening, you can always see the match slightly differently than when you're watching it live. When you watch it live, you experience all the emotions and all the stress and the panic. When you watch it back and you know what's going to happen, you don't experience a lot of that. So I was watching these players quite intently. And like I say, I will come on to individual performances because I thought they did okay, but there was a real lack of quality. So let's break down the game. And certainly the first half had a number of talking points despite no goals. So the first moment, and it was a moment that really did come back to bite us, I thought, was the Aya chance. Now, this is a moment where Martinelli is tracking him, but it's a fantastic run from the Brentford player. You've got to say that. And very interesting that a very deep player, a defender, a defensive player, is kind of making that overlapping run. I don't know if you guys remember, a few years ago, Sheffield United came into the Premier League. They played 3 at the back with like overlapping centre-backs, and it's not something we've seen done since until really this game, I think. Apart from by teams like Manchester City and Arsenal, who are almost so high up the pitch, centre-backs often get themselves in odd positions, but actually running from deep, it's a different kettle of fish altogether. So Aya just bursts forward, and of course we see that for the Brentford goal from Ayoade, I think it is. He bursts forward and gets a fairly decent shot off. It's a good pass down the right-hand side. But Brentford, that was the first point. of them targeting our left, their right, and we've seen that many, many times, haven't we, across the years when we had Zinchenko in there. When it was Zinchenko, people like to launch the ball in and try and drop it on him. I think that's something we have seen a little bit, but we are seeing more and more now, actually. They don't think they can do that it was Tierney and Kivior in this case, but we've seen Gabriel and Miles Lewis-Skelly primarily, Gabriel and Calafiori. You can't really launch the ball in on them, but because we're so aggressive from that left-hand side and that left-back position, there is often spaces, and I think Brentford were really going for that again today. That was the first moment that we saw them do that, and it was that overlapping run from a defender. Of course, we scored, and it was a really, really good goal. It was unlucky. I mean, Tierney is clearly offside, so whether you say it's unlucky or whether you say it's a little careless, I don't know. He's a left back, so I don't really blame him. It's a good line from Brentford. It's a great header from Kieran Tierney. But just a word for Ethan Nwaneri. I was writing my notes as I rewatched it this morning with a coffee in my hand. It was a lovely way to wake up, and I wrote about Nwaneri that he's just lightweight, isn't he? And I think he really needs a pre-season, I should say, on the weights. Lewis Skelly's got that stockiness about him as an 18-year-old, and I don't think Nwaneri quite has that. He has a fantastically low centre of gravity, but he doesn't have the kind of force to go with that. So I write that, and I was thinking, probably not having a great game here. And then Brentford started to give him a bit more room, and I don't know if that was on purpose. They were focusing on someone else, or Nwaneri just got free. It was tough to tell. But when he had the room, he really did start to do some damage to Brentford. And this cross was absolutely wonderful. It's the kind of cross that we've come to know from that right-hand side, from Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard, and most recently, Ethan Nwaneri. He's got so much quality, and I was kind of gutted for him and Tierney in this case, because I think Nwaneri, he came into the team. When did he come into the team? Probably around December, wasn't it? Because he wasn't trusted much when Odegaard was out, but when Saka went out, he was brought in at that point. And he started on fire, and since then, not since then, but maybe over the last few weeks, he hasn't been able to contribute goals or assists. And that was a very, very good delivery from him. And I just wanted it for him, and I wanted it for Kieran Tierney as well. He has been the utmost professional, and I think the Emirates crowd and Arsenal fans in general around the world warmed to Kieran Tierney when he came to Arsenal for his Tesco bag and his shorts and short sleeves in the cold in West Brom, and his attitude. He was a real breath of fresh air in our dressing room at that time, of work rate and professionalism that we didn't have that in the dressing room at the time. He was the first player to bring that. Arsenal fans have always really respected him from that point of view, and I think have a lot of love for him from that point of view as well. So it would have been lovely in what will most likely be his final season, and that yesterday might be his final start for Arsenal. It would have been lovely for him to get a goal, and it was a really good header, really good finish as well. So it was two players I felt needed something, and I really, really wanted it for both of them. So just a bit unlucky, but it was a sign of things to come, and we were building. Of course, then we had the query red card challenge from Norgard on Martinelli. Now, Martinelli's since come out in the post-match interviews and said, look, if my foot's on the floor, he might break my leg there. And it's tough to tell. It really is tough to tell. What I am going to say is that is a really poor challenge. A really poor challenge. He did get booked for it. Simon Hooper got straight onto it and did obviously give a booking. I'm struggling, really. I don't think it is a red card. I think it's one of those where if it was given, I don't think they'd call clear and obvious error, which, I've got my issues with that as a concept, but, overall, I think if it was given as a red card, he's probably not overturning it. Equally, I don't think that that's a red card. I think it's a bad challenge, and I think he has slightly endangered Martinelli, and it's careless. But what I would say is it's not violent. I don't think it was needless levels of force. It was just a bit too much, a bit over the top, a bit too high, and ultimately Martinelli's leg wasn't planted. You could say so many things. If this had happened, then I'd have done this, and we have to find a line somewhere. It's really difficult though with those subjective calls, isn't it? Because it is quite high up on his leg. But I think it's the fact that it's leg on leg. Obviously, if that's boot, if that is foot or boot, I think it is a red card. That changes it for me into that is needless force. That's going to be planted a lot more, and it's super high with a foot as well, with the studs coming in. So for me, it's not a red card. The check didn't seem to take that long, and I'm not sure they looked into it too much. And I haven't seen many Arsenal fans come out and be like, wow, like that's an abomination of a decision. I think that was fair to get a yellow card for that. That was around the 34th minute, I believe. I haven't written that down, but I think it was around the 34th minute. Then we had a couple of little chances before the second half, which I thought were really interesting. First of all, it was Declan Rice producing a little bit of a moment, and up until this point, we had passed around Brentford. We'd put the Wanyeri cross in. I don't think we were really threatening them. And all of a sudden, just before the end of the half, we had two moments where we drove at them. We did things slightly differently, and we took a man on. So Declan Rice receives the ball just outside the penalty area on the left-hand side and does a fantastic kind of drop of the shoulder, gets past his man. He gets past his man, and he takes another little step over and gets a left-footed shot off. Really, really good from him. And it was the first moment where I felt, oh, okay, we're alive a little bit there. Obviously, I know the result when I'm watching it, but, I'm analysing it as I go, and I'm thinking, there's a little bit of something there. We took a man on, we committed someone. And 3 minutes after, Leandro Trossard did the same thing. He drops deep to get the ball, picks it up on the half turn, commits a man with a really, really good dummy, and hits a great left-footed shot. The forces a good save from Flecken. And at that point, I thought, that's a little bit more like what we want to see, actually going and committing a man. And I think without Martin Ødegaard and without Bukayo Saka on the pitch, we didn't have enough people committing men. And I will come on to that a little bit when I talk about the individual performances. Trossard tried, but really I think that was his only decent moment of that kind of vein. Wanyeri, again, he tried, but I think, as I mentioned before, he struggled with size. So yeah, I think we need to do a little bit more of that, and I don't think we had the players on the pitch yesterday to do that, mainly because of Arteta's rotation and his cautiousness. I think it's a very cautious team. It's obviously 0-0 at half time, and not much happens until we score, and what a goal it was. Now, I'm not going to talk about David Raya when we come to the kind of what am I trying to say here? when we come to the player kind of ratings and stuff like that. But I thought he has been, over the last two games, has been really commanding and has always looked to get us going fast and just speeding out of the box. He's sprinting to the edge of the area to look for counter-attacking opportunities, and this one really came off. He had one moment earlier in the game where he hit an outrageous low-flighted ball towards Martinelli, and it was just intercepted by the Brentford defender. If not, that is going to a one-on-one with the keeper with half the pitch to run into. So I think Martinelli probably scores there. So, really good for David Raya over the last two games, and this was the perfect example. He claims the corner, the Brentford corner, runs out, he's looking, and he thinks, I can give this to Declan here. The commentator I was listening to on my replay really loved the first touch from Declan Rice. For me, of course, it's a decent first touch, but it's much more about his run, his physical abilities, and his driving athleticism to take that up the pitch, to force that up the pitch, and not have to pass it too early, because he's so good at running with the ball, driving with the ball. He didn't have to release it too early and allow the defenders to commit to a man. They kind of had to stay where they were, not overcommit, because Declan's driving at them, and he releases a perfectly weighted pass to Thomas Partey, and fair play to Thomas Partey. It's not the best finish in the world, but the thing that really, really impressed me about him was that he just had the athleticism to keep up with Martinelli and Declan Rice. And I don't think at the start of the season I thought we were going to say that. I thought he would not be fit enough for this season. I really didn't rate him athletically anymore. I felt like that kind of sprint was done from him. And, this season has been very impressive with how fit he's been, how well he's played. I think he started electrically, kind of dipped a little bit towards the middle of the season, but he's had a couple of really great performances again recently, including the goal in this one. But I have to say, I thought his all-round performance was really, really good. Really assured with the ball at his feet. I think he made a good couple of interceptions as well, and he had a good header that he sent across the goal very early in the game as well. Actually, there was a cross as well. So he sent 2 good crosses in, one with a head, one with his right foot. And I wrote down that he's looking faster and more nimble than ever, which I think is incredible. I don't know if Arsenal will go back in for his contract. We've seen no signs of that. And of course, there may be stuff going on off the pitch, which we really don't know about yet, which may be swaying Arsenal's decisions. But at the moment, Thomas Partey does seem like a fairly good and simple option to maintain some flexibility. But he is so expensive as well. So it may be that Arsenal don't wrap that up, but he is going to go and play for someone probably in Spain if he doesn't stay at Arsenal. And it feels like he's in a great position to go and have a stellar end to his career. It's a really good goal. It's not the neatest to finish, but he puts enough power on it to get it over and past Flecken. And I thought he had a very good performance. And at that point, we brought on the cavalry. Ødegaard comes on, Saka comes on, Mark Lewis-Skelly comes on. And I thought, okay, this is good news. Because this was the bit of the game I actually managed to watch in the pub. Only really caught the 20 minutes of it. So watching that, I thought, yeah, that's cool. We are in a good position here. We're going to wrap this game up. But it didn't transpire like that. And we got done with this very, very same technique that we saw at the first thing I spoke about with the Aya chance and the defender running around. I think Brentford employed that really, really well for their goal. I think it's Ayawade who comes running round. It's a humongous driving run. I have to say, I don't think Martinelli and Trossard get this right at all. I'm just trying to find the name of the player who did make the run, because I thought it was a terrific run, and I want to give him a proper shout out, but my internet's not working, so I'll come back to that. It's a fantastic run from the defender round the outside, gets in and he puts the cross in. Really, really impressive moment, but Martinelli seems to sense the danger, start to go with him, and stops. And I felt a little disappointed by that, if I'm really, really honest. He's so good defensively, and I think that's why he is so often preferred to Trossard on the left wing, in the sense that Trossard has probably scored more goals, I'm not sure, since he arrived, than Martinelli has, and probably is recognised by Arsenal fans and Arsenal staff as the slightly better finisher. But for me, he does not do the defensive work well enough, and that's something I always think about Martinelli. He might not score quite as many, but I feel far more secure when he's on the pitch. And I think he does better in general play than Trossard does. We've seen Trossard make a few mistakes in the past, which, of course, we don't want players making mistakes. So I think that's kind of why he is often preferred in that spot. But in this case, I think he got it wrong. He went to track, didn't finish the tracking, and that allowed the cross to come in, and then it's a little bit chaotic in there. I think Timber gets beat a little bit easily. There's a header, and it's a very good finish from Johan Wissa. In the preview pod, I spoke about his danger. I think that is now his 15th Premier League goal this season, alongside 16 for Brian Mbeumo. So they've got two killers up front, and it worked for them today. Of course, we had Bukayo Saka on, and he had a chance. He nicked it off Flecken and didn't shoot quickly enough. I thought that was quite strange. Just not the sharpness, I guess, is probably the reason. Couldn't get it out from under his feet. I think he just needs to have a hack at it, even if it's not the best strike. Just get it on target and see what happens. And then, of course, right at the death, he had a good shot go just wide. But that was about it, and I feel like this was a game where we never really did enough to win it. I think we could have done better with the Brentford goal, and Mikel Arteta spoke about that a little bit. But, think of Partey's chance. It was a very, very close chance, close shot, in not quite the centre of the goal, but in a decent position. And even with that chance, we only created 0.96 XG. Now, look, we limited Brentford to 0.24, but ultimately, we just didn't create enough. And it really struck me when I went on, I think it was FotMob or SofaScore this morning. The player with the most chances created was William Saliba with 3. The next highest player was Martin Ødegaard with 2, who had been on the pitch, 30 minutes when you count the extra time. So, look, we didn't do enough, and I felt like, I spoke about it about the middle of the game, we weren't committing our men enough. I'm worried as well about that kind of defensive overlap run. I think other teams will look at that and go, oh, that worked, didn't it? Because a lot of teams recently have spoken about how difficult we are to break down. We have the best defence in the league. We saw against Real Madrid how we can control a game when we don't have the ball just by moving the opposition around with our blocks, with our press. It was very, very impressive, and we've been impressive at that all year. That defensive overload run is a way to make an overload. And it's a worrying development, I think, that worked so well twice in one game. We are going to need to have a look at that and get Albert and Carlos and all of those guys who, let's give a shout out to them. All of the backroom staff for Mikel Arteta have just signed new contracts. So Carlos Cuesta, Albert Steinberg, I believe it's Nicolas Jover as well, have all signed new contracts to keep them at the club. And I'm very, very happy that we've got that sorted, because Carlos Cuesta, there's been links with him going elsewhere. I think he was thinking about Norwich at some point. Albert Steinberg has been linked with the number 1 jobs in kind of Holland at times. So it's good to get them on new contracts and keep that core coaching group together. Really happy with that. Okay, I'm going to take a short break. You can probably hear I'm struggling with my voice a little bit. I don't know where that's coming from. I'm going to take a short break, regroup, and when I come back, going to do a breakdown of some of the individual performances that I thought were quite interesting, talk about the stars and underpars, and maybe just touch on, go back to how we are prioritising the Premier League and some of the risks that come with that. Hello everyone, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you're like me, you finished watching an Arsenal game and you're already looking for the next bit of Arsenal coverage you can find. If that sounds like you, follow or subscribe to Arsenal Unfiltered on your podcast app of choice right now, to make sure you don't miss a single episode from me. I'm here 3 times a week, reviewing matches and covering Arsenal news, and I'm so excited to have you all here as well. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome back to this match review podcast of Arsenal 1, Brentford 1 here at Arsenal Unfiltered. Thank you for joining me. I'm just going to wrap up something from the first half. It was Mikel Arteta who made that excellent run for the Brentford goal. So just wanted to give him his shout out, and probably just a little shout out to the Brentford team altogether. I didn't think they were amazing. They certainly weren't amazing going forward, but the defence for them I thought was very good. Nathan Collins, Vandenberg, Keane Lewis Potter, Aya, that Coyote guy. I thought they all had quite good games, and they made life quite hard for Arsenal. For as much as I think we obviously rotated, and I don't think we brought our best stuff, I thought they did a good job. Okay, let's talk individual performances. So, spoken about some of them already, really. I really want to focus on the guys that came in for this game more than anything, because I think they're kind of the interesting ones to talk about. And maybe the people who were kind of rotated or moved into a different position. So obviously Raya, he has a fairly good game, I think. A big save and involved in the goal. No issues there. For me, Thomas Partey was a really interesting one. Scored the goal from right back. Looked physically much better than we've seen him in previous seasons. Really happy with how he's playing. Of course, Mikel Arteta did issue a bit of a worrying statement. He was asked in the post-match press conference about Thomas Partey's injury. He obviously came off, and it looked like his sock had torn, actually, which was quite strange. And Mikel Arteta said he felt something, so he didn't want to take any risks. And whether Thomas Partey will be okay for Wednesday, I haven't spoken to the doctors yet, so they will check in now and see how he is. So, look, Thomas Partey was a hero against Real Madrid in the first leg. Let's certainly hope that he is fine for the second leg, because we could really do with that controlling, calm presence in the middle. Saliba, obviously, him and Kivior were really, really good. And I've already spoken about Kieran Tierney, about how gutted I was for him on the goal. For me, I think he had a very solid game. Nothing amazing, nothing remarkable, but that is something I'm okay with. I think for me, I think that's what we need to expect from Kieran Tierney. He's coming in, doing a job, doing a solid effort. Miles Lewis-Skelly obviously comes on for the last half an hour, and that's a really, really good position to be in, and so gutted for him that he didn't get his goal. I think really interesting players to talk about are Zinchenko and Nwaneri. They were brought in for Saka and Ødegaard to create in this game, and for me, neither of them look fit enough. Now, that is obviously for different reasons, I think. For Nwaneri, I don't think it's a lack of game time. I think it's just that he's 18. And, I remember myself at 18, I was not particularly big or strong. And I think he really does. Like I said earlier, he looks like he needs a pre-season on the weights in the first team, playing all of the pre-season games, getting used to all of the kind of rough and tumble, and he's obviously getting marked more tightly because everyone can see his quality on the ball. So I really think he needs to just get that ability to have his back to a defender and maintain the ball. I feel like he loses the ball a lot when he's got his back to a defender, but then when he's running at them and when he's got space, he is fantastic. For Zinchenko, I think it's probably more just a lack of minutes. I was, obviously, like I say, I knew the results. I was watching it back and thinking, okay, so how have we only scored one goal in this game? And I was really disappointed with Zinchenko. I thought he was very passive on the ball. I thought he was a little bit one-dimensional, and he just doesn't do what Ødegaard does to move his man about. And those little things, I believe Zinchenko has a killer final ball in him. And we've seen it a couple of times in his Arsenal career. He's played some fantastic passes. He's got fantastic technique, but I just think whether he can't do it or he doesn't value it enough, he doesn't do enough of the basic stuff of just kind of shifting the ball left and right, moving your man about, trying to find space. He's not buzzy enough. I think he kind of runs into an area to receive the ball. If he doesn't receive it straight away, he kind of stops. And he's not particularly active on the ball to kind of shape his body in a way like Martin Ødegaard does. He's had his criticisms this year, Martin Ødegaard, and rightly so. His output's not been good enough. He's done a lot for the team, but he hasn't produced the numbers we need. But he really keeps trying and feels very active whenever he's got the ball, and he feels like he's always taking someone on, trying to commit them left or right. I just got none of that from Zinchenko, and let's come on to it. He's my first under par of yesterday, really. I don't think it was a good day for him. And I don't know if he's interested in saving his Arsenal career. I don't know if Mikel Arteta and him have had a conversation and sort of said, look, it's time to part ways in the summer. There was obviously January interest that Arsenal turned down, but I'm sure they'll be back. Teams in Germany will be back in the summer. If Zinchenko wants to play for Arsenal next season, this performance did not do him any favours. His heat map is really disappointing. There's very little in the penalty area in terms of his touches and his contribution in the penalty area. And anything that really is in the penalty area or close to the penalty area is over on the right wing, not in the lines of the penalty area, in front of the goal, which I think we need. I accept that the right eight has to drift out into those wide spaces at times because of how we build up in wide areas and how we get out from presses and blocks. That's often how we do it with Rice and Ødegaard splitting wide and creating an overload out there. I accept that, but those guys get back into the middle. And I don't think Zinchenko did anywhere near enough of that. So he gets my first under par. And another player who, look, I don't think he was terrible yesterday, but I don't think, again, if he wants to play at Arsenal next season, he's doing quite enough at the moment, is Trossard. He obviously scored against Everton. That was great. He had a good chance here against Brentford. But I do think when I watch him, I always think, I don't like his general play. I don't. And it's tough. It's a tough watch, really. Because you think if you're a striker, if you're an attacker, if you get a goal or an assist, 90% of your job's done. You have to just be okay for the rest of the game. And he got a goal against Everton. He nearly got a goal against Brentford. And I think he just doesn't look right for this Arsenal team. And that's why I'm giving him an under par. And I think his Arsenal career is coming to an end. When he plays up top, I mean, look, we've seen Mikel Merino, who is our second choice left eight, go up top and produce brilliant numbers. When Trossard goes up top, we can't post up on him. He cannot be the guy that is the centre point of the team. And even Mikel Marino, who's never been an attacker in his life, he can do that. And he's physical and he's big and he's intelligent with his movement. I think Trossard, it feels like rather than engaging defenders and keeping centre-halves occupied, I feel like he runs away from them far too much. And the false nine was a great thing in the early 2000s and early 2010s. Messi did it brilliantly. Fabregas did it brilliantly. A couple of teams tried to replicate it. I think Aguero did that sort of role for a bit. We've seen it work, but I just can't see it working right now in the game as it is, where, especially when you are playing with such compact teams, he's not really dropping into space. He's just dropping onto a different Brentford player. He's coming into where the midfielders are, and they are physically bigger and better than him as well. So I can't see a place for him up front at Arsenal, and I cannot see a place for him on the left wing because of his lack of pace. He's going to score goals. He'll probably get a few more before the end of the season. And there might be times where I sit here and go, look, I think Trossard's had an absolutely brilliant game there. He's scored a goal, he's got an assist, whatever. But I just think this game yesterday is the perfect example of why it doesn't really work for Trossard anymore. I think this season, more than any, has shown the trend of actually teams have decided how they're going to play against Arsenal. In 22-23, I think teams were still kind of saying, we'll go and get them. They're Arsenal, they're a soft touch. We'll go and get them. They don't do that anymore, right? And when we brought Trossard in initially, the January of that season and then the season after, there was still a little bit of people going for us. Very few teams go for us now. They sit in and they compact those spaces that Trossard loves to play in. I don't think he's quite good enough to get out of them. They've done it for Bukayo Saka for years, but he is good enough to play in those very, very tight spaces. I don't think Trossard physically or technically is quite good enough, unfortunately. So it's Zinchenko and Trossard for the under pars for me. Unfortunate for them. There are a couple of players who I thought were really good. I've already spoken about Thomas Partey. He would get one of my stars. Got a goal. Looked really good. Hopefully he's not got an injury. And another player who's going to get my star, and rightfully so, what a week this man has had, is Declan Rice. He got the assist today, and I just think, generally, my reason for giving him the star is not about the assist. It's not about being on a high about him from Real Madrid. It's the level of professionalism this guy shows. I think for me, you could come into a team with £100 million price tag on your head and say, I'm going to run this midfield. And, he's playing regularly for England. He's probably the next England captain, him or Jude Bellingham, one of those guys. It would be very easy for him to get an ego, but he does the dirty work. And even though he has a all-time Champions League performance against Real Madrid during the week, he is back, focused, ready to go, and he just has amazing energy, amazing work rate. Even in a game where all the players around him have been rotated, he is that linchpin in our midfield of maintaining the professionalism, maintaining standards, always running, always tracking, always trying to get on the end of stuff. This yesterday wasn't his best performance in an Arsenal shirt. He did well, but he's had much better games than this. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my voice this morning. He's had better games than this, but I think for me, the reason he gets that star is just for the absolute utmost professionalism and work rate that he shows, even on games where it looks like Mikel Arteta isn't prioritising them as much. He wants to win all the time, every time. I imagine he's a bloody nightmare in training, to be honest, because I imagine he's one of those guys who is just desperate to win every five-a-side game, doesn't want to go in the middle and run those, so he's really, really on top. He's a fantastic player. Okay, that brings us to the end of the game. I think I'm just going to quickly talk about this kind of Premier League, Champions League paradox we've got going on, because we still have 6 Premier League games left. Okay, we might have, if we're lucky, we might have 4 Champions League games left. So there's 10 games possibly left of the season. Of course, the worst case scenario, there's 7. That is very, very worst case scenario. And there's some big games coming up. Look, next week we've got Ipswich, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so we've got Ipswich on Sunday. Then we've got Palace, Bournemouth, Liverpool and Newcastle feel massive for me, because I think we might have some Champions League ties to be looking at and considering, but I think both of those teams deserve a beating from us this year. we should have beaten Liverpool at the Emirates. We got very unlucky with how the injuries played out and the Saliba red card and the way we ended, the back four we ended with in that game. That the fact that Liverpool only got a draw, I think, is quite embarrassing for them. So, that was really patchwork stuff. And I just think they need taking down a peg or two. I'd love to beat them at Anfield and kind of spoil their party a little bit. Certainly don't want to be giving them a guard of honour in that game. That feels really, really bad. Hopefully they'll have it wrapped up before then. And obviously Newcastle knocked us out of the Carabao Cup and have beaten us in the league. So they deserve a hiding from us. That'll be towards the end of the season at the Emirates. I think the crowd will be up for that. So look, we've got to get back to a place where we are prioritising the Premier League. And look, I'm sure if we go deep in the Champions League, there won't be too many grumbles about rotation in games against Bournemouth and Palace. Of course not. But I think there will be grumbling if we rotate there. And for me, we need to just get back to that point where everyone is heavily prioritising every game and make sure we are, I guess, back in that kind of very professional feeling, like every second ball, every corner is life or death. That's where I'd like us to get to. The semi-finals of the Champions League, if we get through, and that is still an if, are the 29th and the 30th of April and the 6th and 7th of May. So we will be coming into the Liverpool game off a Champions League semi-final if we are lucky. Of course, we've got Southampton away on the last day of the season. If we get to the final, I can see a lot of rotation for that. The final is on the 31st of May, the second day of my stag do, actually. So hopefully, if we are there for my stag do, that's going to be absolutely incredible. So yeah, I guess to wrap that point up, I think we need to get back to the point where we are picking stronger teams in the Premier League and we come back to a place where it feels like a priority again. Because some of these games right now, when you see the teams come out, they're feeling a little bit, not dead rubberish, but a little bit kind of flat. And I understand the need to rotate, but for me, I've never been someone who's called for tons and tons of rotation. Never been too critical of Mikel Arteta for not rotating, because I do believe that actually he's right when he says a lot of the very, very best players play a lot of football. That is what they do. Hopefully we can rotate a little bit and keep people fresh. That's where I want to see, somewhere in between the kind of stubborn will never rotate and this kind of will change 5 or 6 players a game. I'm going to leave it there because it's a bit of a strange game. Next week I'll bring you a Real Madrid preview, of course, and obviously a Real Madrid review. We might preview the weekend Ipswich game, or we might just review that. I'll see how the diary is looking. Hopefully bring you both, but if not, it will be minimum 3, with 2 about the Real Madrid tie and 1 about the Ipswich tie. I am going to try and find some time to do an Arsenal roundup as well, because there's been little bits of news. We've seen Andrea Berta at games. We've seen the Kai Havertz news that he might be back before the end of the season. Absolutely mind-blowing, that one. So, look, I'd love to get one of those out, but with the schedule of games at the moment, it's very, very difficult. But I will keep bringing the match previews and the match reviews coming as regularly as I can. Look, it's a big, big challenge on Wednesday night, regardless of the fact that we have a 3-goal advantage from the first leg. It is Real Madrid. It is the Bernabeu. We need to be on it. We need a big performance. And if you are listening to this and you're an away fan, you have a ticket, please just do us all proud. Go and bring as much energy as you can to the Spanish capital. Drown out the Real Madrid crowd if you can. Do your everything. And help the boys bring home what would be a historic Champions League tie victory for the Arsenal. I'm starting to get nervous again. Maybe that's just the pessimistic Arsenal fan in me. Maybe that's seeing what Real Madrid have done to teams in the past. But hopefully, we get that one over the line. We have a great performance and we have a memory to look back on this season for, or another memory, I should say, to look back on this difficult season for and say it was all worth it. I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much for following. Thank you for listening, and I will speak to you very, very soon.